Welcome to Limitless, the Blind Beginnings podcast where seeing things differently inspires limitless possibilities. The Limitless podcast was created in order to inform, educate, entertain, and share stories from within the blind and partially sighted community that show that the opportunities for those who are blind or partially sighted are truly limitless. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to your host, the founder of Blind Beginnings, Shawn Marsolais.
Welcome back to Limitless, the Blind Beginnings podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Marsolais. Thank you for joining us for another awesome episode today. Before we get into the episode, though, I just wanted to say thank you to our listeners. We're coming up to October, and October is Blindness Awareness Month, and we want to make sure that we produce some episodes that will educate our listeners about blindness and visual impairment. So if there's a topic that you want us to talk about that we haven't hit yet, please send us an email to limitless@blindbeginnings.ca. We would love to hear from you. We want to share content that is interesting to you and informative. So please send us an email if there's something that you would like us to talk about. Okay, on with today's show. We're talking about something that's very special. 5 years ago, we did a project called Do the Grind Blind. We just had our 5-year anniversary this past weekend. And we're going to talk about that today. And because I also participated in Do the Grind Blind, we're bringing Rob back from behind the scenes to host this episode. So welcome back, Rob.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity to once again come to center stage and help out.
Yeah, no, thanks for being here. And I love it when I get to kind of take a seat with the other guests and just be one of them. So I'm excited.
So maybe what we'll do to start is we should probably introduce some of the people that we have brought on the podcast to talk about it. These are returning hikers that did the grind back 5 years ago and also participated in this weekend's reunion hike. So, Shawn, I'm going to let you do the introductions. So take it away.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we have four youth joined us this past weekend to hike the grind again, 4 climbers who previously climbed, and 3 of them are with us today. So we have Randi. Hi, Randi.
Hello again.
We have John. Welcome back, John.
Thanks for having me up here again.
And we have a first-time podcaster, I think. We have Russell. I don't think you've been on Limitless before, have you?
No, I haven't. I really should more often. I just don't have the time, but I should.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us today. Me. And we also have with us today one of the guides who joined us 5 years ago and on the weekend. We have Russell. Do you want to introduce your guide?
So, he was my guide going up the grind. This is one of my best friends, also named Shawn. Funnily enough,
great name.
Yeah, good name. Mm. But just for simplicity's sake and for clarity's sake, well, we can just call him Terrance. Do you approve?
Yeah, approve.
All right.
Middle name.
It was very confusing on Saturday because, well, first of all, I should say 5 years ago when we did the grind, we had 3 Shawn. We had myself, right. We had this Shawn, and we had Shawn Heaslip, who was working with us at the time. And so then on this past Saturday, Russell's referring to Terrance, and I'm like, oh, you brought a different friend? I thought Shawn was coming. And it was Shawn, but he was going by Terrance. So
we decided that early on just to clear things up, make it less confusing for everybody. Because I already knew there was like 2 Shawns, and I'm like, oh, that's right. There's going to be a third one.
Right. Probably wasn't an issue because we were pretty spread out on the trail. But anyways,
yeah, but still.
Back to you, Rob.
Maybe what we'll do first, just for people who maybe aren't from the Lower Mainland or who aren't familiar with the Grouse Grind, maybe we'll just put this in a little bit of context and describe what it is. So The Grouse Grind is basically, it's a hiking trail that goes up the face of a mountain in North Vancouver called Grouse Mountain. It's not a long trail. It's only about 1.5 miles long. But the catch to that is that during that 1.5 miles, you gain elevation of about 2,600 feet. So very, very steep. Parts of the trail do have things like some stairs, but only parts of the trail. And there's also plenty of obstacles and uneven terrain and switchbacks. So it's definitely not a hiking trail for casual hikers or for anybody who's faint-hearted. So with that, Shawn, my first question, I guess, is how the heck did it come about that you took a group of blind hikers and guides up this monstrosity?
Well, it was actually Christina Duncan, who's a rec therapist at Sunny Hill Health Center for Children in Vancouver. I've known Christina for quite a few years, worked together, and she approached me at some sort of Pro D thing that we were doing. And she said, I have this idea. What would you think about bringing a group of blind youth up the Grouse Grind? And I had done the Grouse Grind like maybe 15 years before, and it was really, really hard, but also probably one of the things that I was the most proud of doing in my life. And I just love the idea. I'm all about like facing our challenging ourselves and pushing our limits. I thought it was a fabulous idea. So from there, it kind of brought it to the board. I brought it to the staff. I brought it to the youth. Some people were like not crazy about the idea. Other people loved it. It was kind of, a mix. But I guess more people loved it than didn't. And we did it.
Now, and on that original hike, how many hikers did you take up?
So we had 9 Blind Beginnings youth, and then we had myself and Shawn, another staff at the time, who were also visually impaired. So there was 11 visually impaired folks, and then a bunch of guides. Most of the youth had a guide. Most of us who were visually impaired had a guide as well, a sighted guide.
So now, how long did you guys train for this? Because I know you didn't just, show up at the bottom of Grouse Mountain on a Saturday and just do it. So how long was that process?
We trained for 4 months. Each month we did a hike, and each hike got a little bit harder than the month before. And it was very intentional. It was, starting off with a flat 10K hike, which took probably 2 hours. But the idea was if you have trouble walking on a flat surface for 2 hours, you're going to struggle on the Grouse Grind. So you better start training. Then we did the Coquitlam Crunch, which has about 500 stairs up the side of the mountain. So it's like a quarter of the distance of the Grouse Grind. And again, just sort of getting used to the elevation and going upstairs. And this was also that the guides could also practice on different environments. Then we did Quarry Rock, which I'm saying we, but I actually didn't do Quarry Rock. I didn't do some of the hikes with the group, but that's another story. And Quarry Rock was more varied terrain. So there was kind of loose gravel, there's some stairs, there's some rocky bits there. It's just to give them the idea of not really knowing what to expect from one part of the hike to the next. And then they did the BCMC trail, which goes up Grouse Mountain. It's a little bit longer, not quite as steep, more switchbacks. And that had a lot of challenging components as well. So basically every month it got a little bit harder. The hope was that they were training on their own in between the hikes, but the hikes were sort of the group training parts of the project.
So I'm going to put this question out to everybody for all the hikers. So in terms of this training, did you guys find that it prepared you for the actual grind? Was anybody surprised on either side? Like, was it more difficult or easier than you thought it was going to be?
I think there's a measure of a lot of these sessions were sort of like, it depends on the person, but personally for me, I found that it helped with communication the most, because a key part of this whole thing is communication between hiker and guide, and especially for Koya Rock and BCMC, not so much for the Crunch and Deer Lake because those are relatively the same terrain, but you have different varying terrains, and the guide, is figuring out how to communicate with you. So it makes it very, very important to have these sort of warm up training sessions, I think. I personally was I was surprised it was a little easier for me personally. I found it easier than I thought until BCMC, but that's just difficult because that's the mountain. So
I think all of the hikes leading up to the grind definitely helped and were very important, but I'm not sure that it's because I think I can speak for probably most of the group in that we are not hugely athletic people. There's a couple of athletes who work out in their spare time in our group, who at least one of them is in this podcast today. But most of us do little or very little weekly fitness, I would say. So it gave us a good idea, but nothing really entirely prepares you for it either.
Well, I mean, just the experience of having the training last time and not having it this time. Like, Russell, would you say there was a difference?
Yes, there was. 5 years really takes a toll. 5 years without doing it again, we're in between those 5 years, plus the pandemic really takes a toll on your physical health.
Right.
So
everyone's probably gained some pandemic weight. I'm going back to school, so I'm doing my freshman 15 weight on top of that 10 years later. No training in between for most of us, so it was definitely harder this time.
But
yes,
I can also agree that just the training hikes actually did matter. And Randi and I and some other people actually did the grind earlier in the summer just for fun to bring some people up, and even that time was harder. And doing it again only 2 months later, I actually was able to increase my time. Although it's not like I was hiking every day, but yeah.
We had two reasons for the training. One was to kind of show the youth a bit of what to expect, because how can you possibly explain the Grouse Grind to someone who can't see? It's not like you can Google it and look at photos or watch a video of someone climbing or whatever. You just, until you're doing it, you don't really know the depth of how crazy it is. But the other reason was to prepare the guides for you also, how do you teach a guide to guide up a mountain? That's different from just basic sighted guide. So, Shawn, I'm wondering for you, how was it after 5 years? Have you and Russell been hiking since then? Did you remember? Did you have to sort of start over with all your communication? How did that go?
I mean, well, we've kept in touch for quite a while. So, but since 2020 was, 2020, we didn't. I would say it was pretty quick for us to get back into the swing of things, like guiding normally, and then I kind of adapted to a new form of hiking up difficult terrain, which was just looking back, always looking beyond the eyes, observing. Occasionally, I would miss some things. Russell can attest to that.
Yeah.
my shins can attest to that. Yes, my shins.
Yes. I was looking for the body part.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was guided this time with Emily, our former staff member, who had never guided on the Grouse Grind before. And it took about halfway up to develop the language, right? Okay, these are house stairs, which is what we would call the man-made wooden stairs, because they're a little bit more normal to what you might find in terms of depth in a house. Whereas
house stairs. Oh, yeah, I like that name.
Yeah. Or she would say knee if it was a step that was higher than my knee, because there's the height of the stairs differ depending on what you're stepping up onto. So, and then sometimes I would need both hands to literally crawl up if it was really up to my hip. So yeah, we kind of eventually developed some good language, because as you get more tired, you have less ability to say more about just, describing what's around you. I mean, I think I was more tired than she was, but it helps if you figured that out.
And big rock and bigger rock don't really cut it.
That's right. Or big step, really big step.
Really big step.
Yeah.
This time around, Russell would know if it was a big rock or anything. If I would just like stop and like say something in utter disbelief of how I would describe it or like to guide him towards it. I hope that tone got through to you.
It did. It worked. But to be fair, I kind of knew it was happening because I would just be like, all right, this is a big rock. I would just know. Usually, I don't know.
All right, splendid.
Well, we should probably explain that we used hiking poles, or at least I did, instead of a white cane. So you can kind of use the pole to feel the height of the next step that you're going to take, which definitely helped me a lot. I don't think I could do it without the hiking pole.
So let me ask the people that are here during that training, that initial training, was anybody here tempted to bail on this whole idea? And did you lose anybody during that training process?
We did lose one person, but we sort of knew from the very beginning she probably wasn't going to do the grind because she had a surgery booked. So it wasn't so much that she dropped out because it was too hard. It just wasn't going to work out. But she wanted to start with the group and do the parts that she could do. There is one other person I know who considered after the first hike that maybe this was going to be too hard, but she did stay with it and ended up doing really well. But I don't know if did any of you have second thoughts about this through the training?
I don't know if I remember. It's been a while. A lot of stuff happened in between, and once it's over, you kind of blank. It's kind of like looking back at the hike. It's kind of like a bit of a haze of a fog of like, oh, what was I thinking then? What was happening then? I don't really remember.
Yeah,
I don't think I had any. I was actually looking forward to the hike. Actually, I remember being very excited about it. Like every time we do a training hike, I'd be like excited for the next one. All right, what's next? So I was kind of anticipating it.
Is this the part where I'm supposed to mention that I wore a 20-pound vest?
it can be. Yes, I was thinking that.
Oh,
Yeah, there's a couple of people that were extra ambitious, shall we say.
Yeah, got some vests. We threw some plates in Russell's bag and Clement's bag, and yeah, we had a little fun.
Did you actually wear a weighted vest for the actual grind?
No, because that would defeat the point of going up the mountain quickly.
Oh,
I
I see.
the BCMC.
So for some of the training hikes, you were carrying extra weight so that you would be extra fit.
Yeah, something like that.
Make it extra hard so that you're more prepared for the brutalness of the grind.
he put some weights in my bag too.
Wow.
For most of
Yes.
us, the challenge was just making it to the top, not making it to the top fast.
Totally.
I think we did either either of the original hike or this hike. I don't think we did too bad overall with timings. I think the record is something ridiculous, like under half an hour, but that's clearly somebody who does it all the time. I think most of us did it in about 2 the original hike.
Yeah. Around that.
I think
2
like
hours.
2 hours. I think the average was like 2 hours. Yeah.
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 Well, I think Shawn was last. You were all really close. You were within the hour and a half to hour 45 to 50. The last like 1 or 2 were just over 2 hours.
I think
really?
mine was hour 40. So
Yeah, they were actually pretty, because we actually did the training. Everyone was because I finished at an hour 20 something, and then Randi was next at 20 minutes after that, and then everyone was coming in like right behind her, like every 5 or so minutes. So.
Well, in my defense,
Yeah, I was waiting to see when you'd bring that up.
I broke my foot after the first training hike 5 years ago, and I didn't get to do the second, the third, or the fourth. And then 2 weeks before the Grouse Grind, my doctor said, yes, you're good to go. You can hike. So I was I was not prepared. I was not very fit. And I don't know how I got up that quickly, because I feel like, I feel like I am fitter now than I was then, not recovering from anything broken. And yet it took me an extra hour this time compared to last time. So I don't know, but I am older.
We could attribute that to Derek.
Well, yeah, that's interesting because so my husband was guiding me 5 years ago, and there is a little bit of dragging me up the mountain, come on, you got this. Emily was much more patient and just letting me go at my own pace and very, very courteous. So I don't know if that shaved an entire hour, but who knows?
Well, who else joined you for the first time on this hike, Shawn?
Oh, yeah. This past weekend, my son joined me, and he's turning 9 this week. So he's only 8. And he did it, and he beat me. Did an awesome job.
They just left you in the dust there.
He did, absolutely.
Yeah,
after a certain point.
So now it's funny. Like I've done the grind a couple times in my life, and probably never again. But I know that for myself, like it is a struggle. Especially when you hit that halfway mark and you think you're at the top. That's a real moment. But in any case, like if your experience was a little bit different because you guys were all sort of part of this event and you were part of a sort of a community that was climbing it. Did you find that really made a difference? Like, did you that encouragement that you're getting from each other and just sort of that drive to make the event a success? Do you think that played a factor in the climb?
It definitely did for me. I remember being competitive with Clement, who was right ahead of me for the first part of the grind 5 years ago. Like there was some sort of, banter back and forth about who was going to beat who up the mountain, but also the media was there. There was a documentary was being filmed of the whole thing. So I knew there were cameras occasionally that could be watching, which makes me push harder. So I think a mix of the adrenaline and like 4 months leading up to this, like it was a big deal. We were all pretty excited. We were a really large group. We were over 20 people. That definitely helped me because this past weekend we were, much a smaller group, still a group and still helps to have the group, but there wasn't the same, nobody's really watching. No one was competing with anybody except John might have been competing with himself, but
John's always competing with himself.
True. So that was my experience. What about you guys?
Yeah, I'd agree that it makes a difference how many people you're with. And this is actually the 3rd time this summer I've done the grind. I didn't plan to do it 3 times this summer. It just kind of happened with 3 very different times. First time I went with just one person. It was basically just us, but we did get a lot of encouragement along the way because I wore a sign on my backpack just to identify us in case we're holding up the entire trail, because we didn't have this big group and coordinated t-shirts and everything like 5 years ago. And we did it. I think it took about 5.5 hours to get to the top. And that's really hard when one or the other of you is just like, feels like you're dying. And the only other person to encourage you is the other person who also feels like they're dying. Mm-hmm. The second time was with John and a couple of other people. And that, the time was, I think, 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Roughly. For me, that day personally went badly, but we all made it to the top anyways. And then this time with more people, and I think you said it was about 250 or close to 3 hours for the last of us few.
I think it helped a bit also because of everyone's hiking poles were painted like white canes, and we all had t-shirts. And so while we were hiking, we also did a lot of talking and advertising to random people. So by the time people were getting up, by the time I even got up there were already people who had passed us, who we'd talked to, and they're like all sitting around and cheering.
And you end up meeting a lot of different people. Like we met some people doing the hike who were from California on a business trip, and some other people that just do it a lot for fun, kind of, or extra fun exercise for them. And because it's not just the locals that do it. It's a kind of a tourist. If you're looking for an athletic kind of tourist thing to do, it's one of the main attractions.
I know that the documentary, the presence of the cameras and the media and the documentary stuff, it really, you can probably, if you've seen the documentary, it really kicked my competitiveness into high gear. I am normally like kind of competitive-ish a little bit, but like since with the added cameras, I was like playing it up a little more. So I ended up being super competitive, and I think it actually kept me going because I remember I didn't want to rest. Like I was going, and I thought, hey, it's time for a water break, and I'm like, no water break, keep going. It was, and now that one this time didn't have it, so I didn't have any cameras, no pressure, so I'm just like, oh, just water break, okay. So
yeah,
main
it
difference
was like
there.
Russell and I discussed. We looking back on the do the grind blind. He really came out like the villain of the documentary, with like being the sounding like the arrogant kid. I was like, no, I cannot. This cannot be when he like got to the top while there was like happy music playing in the background. It was quite hilarious.
I think he was more the comic relief. He was pretty funny. I feel like we're all referring to Accessible Media made a documentary called Do the Grind Blind, and you can find it on YouTube if anybody wants to watch it. It's a 40-minute documentary of the whole training and hike, and it's really, really good. And they picked like 3 youth to feature, and Russell was one of them. And he was quite hilarious. I feel like, I don't think you were trying to be funny, but it comes across as funny.
I looked at it now, and I'm like, I watched the documentary in preparation. Like I think I watched it like a few days before the reunion hike, just to remember all the stuff that happened. I'm just like, oh, I'm watching it. I'm like, oh, I said that. Why did I say that? Like yeah. I was like, regretting what I said. I'm like, why did I say that? What is this? Like I was like critiquing myself, and I was like, wasn't too satisfied with my performance in it, but if you guys thought it was good, then yeah, okay, I'll like it, I guess.
I wish we had a GoPro for Russell for this last trip, because I think that you stick them side by side, and I think that would have looked hilarious.
I mean, I would have been dying. You wouldn't have seen me. I would have been like, I would have just been dying. Like, I just been slumping over. The camera would have just been all over the place, and I'd just be dying. Like,
well, we could already hear your motivational noises most of the way up.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, that's just me. That's just my exertion of energy. I need to have it. It's a good thing to do.
Russell was like screaming, like pretty regularly.
Every time I stopped,
it sounded like he was in pain, and people were actually asking Randi and I, "Is he okay?" Like we were worried the helicopters were going to come in and take him off to the hospital.
I wasn't in pain.
They're like, "Is your friend okay? You don't really seem very concerned about him." And I'm like, "Yeah, no, he's fine. I think he's just motivating himself. That or we're just really terrible friends."
I heard Russell before he even got to the top of the mountain.
Was he yelling?
Yep, I was sitting there just waiting, and all of a sudden I hear something. I'm like, "What was that?" And then I hear it again. I'm like, "Is that Russell?" They hadn't even come up to the top of the boulders yet. No, the thing. I'm just like, it's probably him, unless some rather random person is yelling on the mountain.
Yeah, it's probably me.
I must say that in the middle of the grind, after Russell got like the ahs out of the system, it was a very quiet and nice hike up. It was like forest ASMR, just peaceful. I was like, wow, why is it so quiet? And then I just hear like Russell just breathing heavily on like, I need to take a break. Like, okay, that was the only like disruption of noise that I got.
Well, see, he did training before. He actually did some training before he went though. Like he like was. I remember he messaging me. He's like, "Oh yeah, I just took a walk. I'm soaking sweat. I'm just here sitting on my front of my computer eating a Big Mac from McDonald's." And I'm just like, "Yes, training. Yes, should probably do that." Never did it.
I mean, I did offer to like piggyback you up.
That would have been extra weight. You want an extra 145 pounds?
That's okay. I mean,
That's funny. I did only give you guys like 3 weeks notice that we were doing the reunion hike. If that might not have even been 3 weeks. So I didn't really give a lot of time for any
It was like a
training.
month.
Yeah,
It might have been less for Terrance there.
that's true. Same time.
We did hike up Burning Mountain a couple times. Like we went like he came over to my place and we hiked up Burning Mountain a couple times for training because we were like, okay, we better do something.
Mhm.
We should do at least something.
That's good.
Yeah.
So we did that a couple times.
Yeah, Burning Mountain. It's a pretty good place. Very short, but very steep.
So let's talk about the reunion climb then. So Shawn, who came up with the idea to do a reunion climb, and how did you feel about it initially?
I'm pretty sure. No, I think it was Rob actually that came up with the idea. He's like, well, so last year when we were coming up to the anniversary of Do the Grind Blind, we talked about maybe doing a podcast about it. And then we realized that it was 4 years. And if we waited a year, we could maybe do a 5-year reunion and then talk about it. So that's like, I've been worrying about this for a year.
It's a good time to train. You could have warned everybody.
I did do it a year ago. I think I wasn't sure if it would really happen or not. And then all of a sudden this summer it was like, okay, this is happening. This is coming up. I got to put it out there and see if people are interested. So, I mean, if we had more capacity, it would have been maybe cool to put it out there to all of the Blind Beginnings community to see if there was a new group of youth who wanted to train and, kind of like bring back the returning hikers, but also bring in some new hikers. But it was our first year back to in-person programming after COVID. We just didn't really have the capacity to do that. So I only invited those who had done it before. And it was cool to see, there were a few more people who were also interested, but we just couldn't land on a date that worked for everybody. So we ended up doing the reunion on the exact anniversary date, which is kind of cool. And I was just grateful that we had the group that we did. It was cool. And some people had to hike with a different guide this time. Shawn and Russell were lucky to be, the same pair as 5 years ago, but some people had to kind of learn a new communication system with their guide. Maybe didn't know each other as well, but I think everyone had a good time and we all made it up and nobody got injured. So I think it was a success.
Not seriously injured anyways. I did fall and cut my hand, but it was like very superficial. Just shoved a Band-Aid on it till we got home.
Right.
Yeah, I whacked my shin My shin has a couple of nasty bruises, but other than that.
I have a little scrape on an elbow that hit a rock somewhere along the way, but I mean, that's just normal life, I feel like.
I have a huge galaxy colored bruise on the back of my thigh right now from where I went to sit down and I misjudged, so I landed on a pointy rock next to the flat rock I was aiming my butt for.
Ouch.
Quite spectacular.
So you have a resting injury.
Technically it was still in motion until I hit the rock. That was the problem.
So I want to talk actually a little bit about climbing with a somebody that you hadn't been training with and sort of comparing what those two experiences were like. Because it seems to me that, initially when you talk about, we didn't do any training, you think of the physicality part of that, but it sounds like that's actually not the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is learning that communication. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, for me, my guide had only ever guided me on sidewalks. So to take it to a hike, we'd never done a hike before. Thankfully we know each other pretty well and respect each other. And I trust her completely. So I wasn't really worried, but sometimes, I mean, John, you were paired up with Johnny and I don't know how well you really knew him, if that was comfortable or uncomfortable or, how was that for you?
Before I say that, I will also like to mention that Shawn's guide, when she was driving us up the mountain, was asking us questions. She's stressing out a little bit. She was like, "Oh, I haven't guided in forever, and now I got to guide up a mountain. What are we doing? How am I doing this?" And she's worried about. It was pretty funny on the way up. I will say that. And then, I do know my guide a little bit because his younger brother is Like I knew him a lot when he was growing up, so we kind of knew each other a little bit, and we got to know each other a little more on the trail. And for me, like I didn't need too much. There's actually some points where I actually kept him from falling backwards a couple of times. I had to remind him to like a little bit more hiking form than just like walking up stair form kind of thing. And it was all right. We had a decent time. I also realized that my vision was different back then too, because I had my cataract surgery in 2018 or something. So my eyes are a little different, but I was still like, as long as I can see where your feet are going, I'm just gonna follow you up the trails on these skinny parts. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. My vision has definitely changed too. And I mean, now it's just completely not helpful at all. But that factors in too. And there are parts of the trail where you can't really, like it's
you
skinny.
Can't hold on at all.
Yeah, you can't. You have to just let go and kind of climb up parts of it.
So I'll open this up to anybody. What, if anything, surprised you the most about this particular reunion hike?
I think for me, every time I do the grind, I've done it 4 times now, I'm surprised at how hard it is. And I don't know why that surprises me. But every single time I go into it thinking, I got this. I can do this. I've done it before. I know what to expect. And I'm always like, I did not remember it was this hard. It just catches me off guard every time.
I definitely remember I was like, no, I did it last time 5 years ago. And I kind of already knew I was like, all right. That was 5 years ago. I was in better shape back then. It's going to be hard, but we trained, right? It shouldn't be too bad. And I remember halfway up, I just started dying. I was like, all right, well, I may have made a mistake. Like, I think at one point I was walking up a bunch of stairs, and I was just like, all right, I may have made a mistake. I may have underestimated my athletic abilities, and now I made a mistake. I can't turn back now. It's halfway, so yeah. I gotta finish it.
Pretty much the same for me, because even though I've done it, this was the 3rd time this summer, let alone 5 years ago or last year or anything. It's still, like I said before, it's kind of like, when you're in the middle of it, you're feeling everything, and then you finish it, and it's kind of like, it's almost like surreal, where it was like, did that really happen? I don't really, am I sure that was real? And, at the quarter way up mark, there's this big scary sign that's like 8 feet, 10 feet tall. And it's like, are you sure you want to keep going? This is the last place you can turn around. Have you run out of water? Are you feeling lightheaded? Like, turn back now. Here there be dragons.
It actually says, if you are feeling tired now. And I was totally feeling tired already. I was like, I'm not going to admit that I'm already feeling tired, but I am feeling tired. It's very
and then
intimidating.
once you're further, like, you can't, I mean, some people go against the rules and do go down because you're not supposed to go back down the flow of traffic on that trail, but down would be almost as hard. And once you're halfway up, it's still, like, it would be almost as hard to get back down as it would be to get up. And you internally refuse to be that person that they have to call search and rescue for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. We should mention that because like, this is not a trail that you can just change your mind once you're sort of a little ways up. They don't actually let you go down because people were getting injured when they were trying to go down. And I tell you that, like, that halfway mark, that sign is burned into my memory. Because that is the mark where you just go, oh, I've made a huge mistake. And I know what you're speaking of, Russell, because that's exactly my thoughts too. But yeah, you're sort of committed once you start it. And so, I'm curious to know whether in the original hike or even this one, were you guys really nervous about, like, going past that mark and knowing that there was no turning back?
I was when I did it earlier this summer, but by this time around, I was like, okay, well, I have more water than I did before. I've done this 2 other times this summer. I have to be able to do this again, even if it, like, takes hopefully not 5 hours again. But look, if you go at a really slow pace and take like 5 or 6 hours, it's not nearly as, like, bad the entire time. But then it takes you a really long time. So that was also deceptive in a way because I was, halfway up sometime or somewhere that time, and it's like, oh, this isn't that bad. I could just do this again by myself. Like, maybe like, not being too ambitious, like maybe like 3 times or 4 times a summer, and then like you get up and finish the rest of it. It's like, never mind. What was I thinking? That's absolutely insane. I'm not doing it again.
For me, there was never, ever going to be a not finishing. I mean, I would have finished if I, nothing would have stopped me from finishing 5 years ago for sure, because there were cameras and I'm very competitive and prideful, I guess. And this time, just pure determination. I mean, I was so dead that last quarter. It was rough. I feel like I would take 10 steps and need to rest again. Like, I don't know what was going on. It was like, my body was like, no, you're done. Why are you still doing this? But we had to keep going. So, but there was never going to be that I wasn't going to finish. I might've come in crawling, but I was going to finish.
Yeah. 5 years ago, it was the second time I've ever done it. I did it once back in like 2008 or something with Clement and one other person and some people. And I was like, yeah, we're getting up this mountain and we're getting up there way faster than the last time because we are not having someone telling us to stop and wait for that one person way back down there. No, we're going.
Well, yeah, John, I was wondering about you because you're always the first one up. Like, do you even feel like part of the group? We didn't see you. You left us at the bottom. We didn't see you till we got to the top. The rest of us were kind of together for a lot of it, but is it lonely at the top?
It's always lonely. No, no. I still had Johnny. I still had my guide. So we had a lot of time to talk, and we just chilling. And well, that's funny because when me and Randi did it earlier this summer, since there were 4 of us and technically 3 of us were visually impaired, we only had one sighted person. I was following one of the other people who was visually impaired, and then at a certain point, like, I actually kind of just ditched them because I'm like, I'll just walk past you and walk in front of you for a bit because it was all the house stairs, as Shawn would call it. And then I could still hear them talking behind me, and I would keep going and going. And if I couldn't see the trail anymore, I'd just wait for the next pair of feet to walk by, and I'd follow those feet up the hill. And that's how I did the last bit. So that time I was actually alone. Felt lonely up there. But this time, I was like, I still had Johnny, so we had a good time. We could have taken a nap. We could have gone and eaten before you guys got there. We were just like, I thought because the other times you were all really close behind. I was like sitting there looking at my watch. I'm like, where's nobody go? I even messaged. I messaged Randi and Russ. I'm like, what number are you guys at? Because I wanted to see, and no one answered for like 20 minutes. I'm like, where me and Johnny are talking. Maybe they don't want to tell us because they don't want to admit where we are. Because I also got a text asking. Tell me when I got there because they were placing bets on how fast I would get up there this time.
We were forecasting. I was forecasting about an hour and a half for John, and then he had messaged me back asking me where we were, and I just forgot to answer at the next like couple of water breaks because I was too focused on water and resting and stuff and not pulling up my phone. And then I saw a second text, and I was like, "This is the entirety of the text, word for word. 33 of 40 dying." Because there's little markers on the trees as you go up that are like out of 40. I don't know what measurements they're using, if it's distance or height or number of steps or whatever, but basically, out of 40, each 10 is just about a quarter of the way roughly. And so, 33 of 40 dying.
So he was already done and we were just over halfway. Just to put that into perspective.
Well, we really, like, even when we were going, I even told Johnny, I'm like, okay, the part I find the hardest is right at the start because the steps are really wide and it's more of a trail than the stairs. And also you're getting used to the elevation again. So I felt like we were just walking, even though we were walking in front of you guys, and I could still hear Russell back down there yelling. And Nick and the other young little boy that was there, they're kind of hanging out near us. And we think that if the moms had let them, they would have just stayed with us the whole time. But we actually, when we got to the halfway mark, I think we actually did the 20 markers in a little over 30 something minutes. And I was like, are we going too fast? Am I going to regret this when we get to the last quarter? And I kind of did, but I didn't feel like we were going that fast. We just Kept walking, taking short breaks and going. The longest break I had was talking to some people who asked me if I was actually blind, and I had a good 5-minute conversation about blind beginnings and a bunch of stuff.
So let me ask everybody this, and this sort of applies to the original grind as well as the reunion. Why was it important for you to participate in it?
I just wanted to, one reason was because it's just fun to do it with the group and just doing it again. And then the second reason was because we did it earlier this summer, I wanted to beat my time from earlier in the summer and try and get closer to my time from 5 years ago.
Basically, I funny thing was, I was talking about the grind to a few people. I can't remember what the context of the conversation was, but I was definitely talking about the grind. I'm like, oh yeah, we did that like 5 years ago. I remember that was a fun thing. And then I think like a month later, Shawn's email comes up, and I'm like, did I just see the future? Like I was just having the grind cravings again. So I jumped at it. I'm like, all right, I'm ready. I'm ready to go.
For me, this time around was mostly just like, well, there's no reason, schedule wise, I can't do it. So I'll do it a third time this summer. Cause again, I don't know what I originally was just like, let's do it with a friend or a group of friends, but then it didn't work out. So I had a couple of groups of friends that we went up different times. And then the reunion email came out and I was like, well, I can only improve on how the second time ended for me personally. So, let's do it again. And the original hike, it was more so of just like, again, yeah, it's a group of people. Of course, there is the more public aspect of like, look, we can do all the same things, whether we're blind or half blind or totally sighted or not. But personally, it was just mostly like, yeah, it's a challenge. Let's do it with a group. And this summer, the main reason I was doing it on my own time anyways, those first 2 times was like, I'm not the kind of person that likes going to a gym. So I'm just trying to find like fitness related things that I can do with some people and kind of keep going.
5 years ago was definitely about changing perceptions of blindness. And, I feel like people who don't really know much about blindness are shocked and amazed by some of the things that we're able to do. And those things are kind of just daily living type things, like walking down the street and crossing a street or cleaning your house or getting dressed. So I feel like if people see a group of youth who are blind climbing the Grouse Grind, then they're probably going to question being so shocked at some of those average things that we do, just living our lives. So that was why I loved the idea. And I did the 5-year reunion or the reunion hike because Rob made me. No, because I love this podcast and I wanted to have it fresh in my mind when we talked about it.
Content.
That's right.
It's all for
about
content,
the podcast,
as the YouTubers say. It's right. All for content.
How about you, Terrance? You could have said no.
Oh no, the answer is simple, really. I may be Russell's guide, but Russell, but that's only physically. Russell guides me as a person, so of course I had to go.
Aw, that's so nice. Wow.
I'm gonna cry now.
Well, don't.
Well, thank you to all of you for.
Same time 5 years from now.
I don't think so. But thank you to all of you for coming back and hiking with me this Saturday and for being here today to share about it. This Do the Grind Blind was one of the highlights of my career, really. I feel like it'll always stand up as a really amazing moment. And I feel like we made history. There's a documentary and everything. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, it was good.
I really liked it. I still tell people about the grind. I still tell people about that, and they're still so impressed. Like I always tell people, oh yeah, I did. Well, I don't always, but like when I get the chance, obviously I do tell them about it, and they are always so impressed with the documentary, and they're like, wow, you did that. It's really empowering to see them be so impressed with us, and I feel like it's I guess a sense of accomplishment, which is nice.
Yeah.
It's always nice to have.
Definitely.
And it's always good. It's always good to see that sighted people are super impressed with what blind people can do. And I think that's a really good thing to have, like chasing that accomplishment, chasing that, yeah, I can do it too. Like chasing that feeling is a very good thing to strive for, I think. So
I just like having those fun times, and when Shawn throws out random ideas, hey, let's go try that. Okay, sure, let's go try that. We're still waiting for do the skydiving blind and such
hey, do the
Do the
sky
surf.
blind, dive on the sky blind, yeah.
Yeah, do the
Do the
something
dive.
fun. Do the dive.
That's-
blind.
I'm
do the
not
dive
doing
blind.
that. I'm not doing that with you. Sorry. That's not happening.
I want to see Rob do the Giants ladder, though. We got to get that next summer.
I also want to thank Rob for taking on hosting today. Thank you for your questions.
My pleasure.
And if you have not seen Do the Grind Blind, you can Google it on YouTube. It's produced by Accessible Media and it's really great. So check it out. You've been listening to Limitless, the Blind Beginnings podcast. If you have a question, a comment, a future topic request, please send us an email to limitless@blindbeginnings.ca. Please share our podcast, like, subscribe, and join us next time.
This podcast has been brought to you by Blind Beginnings, an organization based in Vancouver, Canada, that supports children and youth who are blind or partially sighted, along with their families. Music for this podcast is composed by Sean Bishop and Clement Chow. Production and audio editing by Rob Mineault. For more information about Blind Beginnings and the work it does to support children and youth who are blind and partially sighted, along with their families, visit us on the web at www.blindbeginnings.ca, and also remember to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.